Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are taking on something that feels incredibly complex and chaotic when you're in it. We're looking at the consequences of infidelity and the choices that follow, whether to stay or to leave.
It's a high-stakes situation.
It really is. And you've brought in a fascinating stack of research, both psychological and biological, that seems to offer a kind of blueprint for what happens next. So our mission here is pretty simple. We want to take this deeply emotional crisis and, well, treat it almost like a science experiment. To pull out the patterns, the short-term pains, the long-term changes that show up again and again, no matter who's involved, to give you a map of what's coming.
And that map is so crucial because these kinds of relationship decisions have these huge immediate consequences, but also really distant ones. When you're in that crisis, that emotional storm, it just overwhelms your ability to see what's down the road. So what we're trying to do here is shift the focus from how you feel right now to the future reality. Because what feels true today, well, it might not feel true in 6 months.
Okay, let's dig into that. Let's start with the first scenario, which is often the most agonizing one. The decision to stay, to try and rebuild the marriage. The sources paint a really stark picture of what that initial phase looks like.
They do. The pain is, it's profound. But understanding its structure is really the key to getting through it. We're looking at a period of real emotional injury, and it has a predictable recovery time.
Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. You are doing important work.
We should probably break down those 4 burdens the sources talk about because they really define that first critical year.
Yeah, exactly. The first one is just raw emotional pain. It's described so vividly in the material, not just as sadness, but as feeling. As if a part of your soul has been torn away. It really speaks to the shock of it all, doesn't it? The damage that's done when that foundation of trust is just gone.
It's the collapse of a shared narrative, a shared history. You're not just dealing with fear of the future, you've lost the past you thought you had. And that slides right into the second burden, which is, in a lot of ways, the hardest one to handle. This terrifying state of dependency.
The analogy they use is so striking. It's likened to an addict deprived of their fix.
Yeah.
This constant tension, anxiety, this deep aching longing. You're in this awful place where you need comfort from the one person who inflicted the wound.
And that dynamic is just incredibly volatile. The dependency comes from that shared history, that primal need for security. Marriage is, it's an infrastructure of safety. When that collapses, your mind just scrambles to put it back together, even if the foundation is completely broken.
Right.
That anxiety you feel, the constant checking in, needing answers, that's your brain desperately trying to find a new, safe baseline where one just doesn't exist anymore. The mind knows the partner is dangerous, but it still craves the comfort of what's familiar.
And then there's the third consequence, which is all about the psychological cost of the choice itself, the feeling of entrapment. The source says a deep sense of being caged. Now, is that feeling coming from external pressures like family or judgment, or is it more an internal thing?
The research suggests it's overwhelmingly internal. Yeah. It's that moment you realize you've chosen the known, painful thing over the unknown, potentially liberating future. You start to miss the peace you once had, or you mourn the potential life you just gave up by deciding to stay. That cage is often built from fear and just sheer emotional exhaustion.
And while all of this is going on inside, the sources point out a fourth, very practical consequence. A serious decrease in focus.
That's the real-world fallout, isn't it?
Yeah, your productivity just tanks.
It does. It's easy to just write it off as, having a few rough days, but the data shows it's a severe, measurable impairment. When your brain is dedicating all its resources to processing trauma and anxiety, your ability to do complex work, to concentrate, it just plummets. It bleeds into your professional life, which just adds more stress.
It's a total disruption.
Completely holistic.
So if the crisis is that deep, if it's hitting you emotionally, existentially, and practically, what's the stabilizing piece of data here? How long are you stuck in that state?
This is where the predictability is so important. The data consistently shows this acute, painful phase lasts for a few months, up to about a year.
A year.
Up to a year. And crucially, after that point, the intense volatility isn't sustained. Emotional stability starts to come back gradually. Just knowing that this intense pain is a phase, that it's temporary and you will move out of it, that might be the single most important thing to hold on to during that time. It will not last forever.
That's a powerful idea. That guarantee of stabilization, that there's endpoint to the worst of it. It's a counterweight to that immediate devastation. It helps you focus on enduring a phase, not a permanent reality. Okay, so let's flip to the other side of the coin. If that's the reality of staying, what did the sources say about leaving, about choosing the new relationship, the one that often feels so euphoric?
Right. And this is where the research really challenges the belief that fuels that decision in the first place. I mean, most people who make this choice are feeling an incredible intensity. They believe that passion, that euphoria.
Yeah.
They believe it's going to last forever. They assume that emotional state is permanent.
But the core finding here, the thing all the research agrees on, is that those feelings aren't just likely to change. They are biologically mandated to change. That intense flame, it has to fade.
Exactly. And we need to look at the two big reasons why. The two interlocking mechanisms that guarantee this return to normal. The first one is psychological. It's the disappearance of what they call the forbidden fruit effect.
We've all heard that phrase, but how does the research define where its energy comes from in an affair?
The energy source is risk. It's obstacles and transgression. While the relationship was a secret, it was fueled by, high-stakes planning, the thrill of breaking the rules. Those things dramatically heighten the intensity. But once the relationship is official, once it's public and stable, well, the risk is gone. And that stimulating effect just collapses.
So it goes from being this clandestine secret mission to just managing the logistics of a normal shared life.
Precisely. Suddenly it's about grocery shopping and figuring out chores and maybe dealing with complicated step-family dynamics. The mundane reality of a stable life replaces the thrill of the affair.
The intensity that came from breaking rules can't sustain a life built on making new, boring, functional rules.
You can't. And if that psychological boost is gone, the biological one is also on a timer. The second critical factor is purely biology. Hormonal stabilization.
The chemical foundation for the euphoria.
That's it. That initial stage floods your system with huge amounts of specific hormones. You've got dopamine driving the craving, oxytocin for that intense bonding, and testosterone for energy and drive. This is the neurochemical cocktail behind the in-love state. It's why your heart races, you can't sleep, you lose your appetite. It feels like destiny.
And that's why people mistake it for a permanent bond, right? That feeling of invincibility.
Absolutely. You feel like you finally found the one, but what you're really experiencing is a temporary chemically induced high that evolution designed for rapid pair bonding. The sources are really clear on why it can't last. If your body stayed in that state of intense passion for years, it would be terrible for your health. A massive energy drain, constantly taxing your nervous system.
So it's not a failure of the relationship itself. It's a necessary biological adaptation. Your body has to settle down.
Correct. The body is built to adapt. Passion inevitably transforms. It evolves into what the sources call a more tranquil, long-term relationship. It's a biological certainty. There's this one quote that just sums it up perfectly. Nature gives us a short fertility honeymoon, but it does not last forever.
A fertility honeymoon.
Yeah.
That perfectly frames it. It's a launch mechanism, not the cruising altitude. Okay, but the critical question then is this. If that intensity is guaranteed to disappear, what happens to these new relationships? Do they survive?
That's the dilemma, isn't it? The sources don't give a hard failure rate, but they confirm that a huge stress test happens the moment that hormonal boost is gone. The foundation of the relationship then has to rely on things that were probably overlooked during the affair's shared values, how you handle conflict, mutual respect.
Things that aren't as exciting as the forbidden fruit.
Exactly. The sources say that many people, once things stabilize, realize they were in love with the idea of escape, with the thrill of the chase, not the actual person once the thrill was gone.
Let's pull back for a second and put these two scenarios side by side. On one path, you have this soul-tearing pain if you stay. On the other, this hormonal euphoria if you leave. But the central point is that both of these intense emotional states, they're temporary.
That is the single most important counterintuitive insight here. The intensity of how you feel right now, whether it's agony or ecstasy, is a profoundly unreliable indicator of your long-term happiness.
So the lesson for you, for the listener, is that you have to project forward. You have to assess not just the overwhelming feelings of today, but the long-term consequences that happen after that inevitable stabilization.
You have to look at both paths through the lens of time. Both staying and leaving mean you go through a volatile, high-stakes period, and both eventually transition into a more tranquil state. Understanding when and why those emotions will shift is just essential for making a grounded decision.
Which means the most important factor isn't how strong the feeling is right now, the pain or the pleasure, but the quality of what's left after the chemical and psychological high wears off.
Yes.
It helps you avoid the trap of believing that what feels so essential right now will still feel essential in a year or two.
You have to decide based on what remains, when the dependency fades, when the forbidden fruit is gone, and when the hormones settle. That's the true indicator of long-term stability.
This has been, well, a really powerful map of emotional predictability. We've outlined the short-term pain of staying and the biological necessity of passion fading if you leave. It's a very clear picture.
And that brings us to our final thought for you. Since this deep dive confirms that the intense passion fades and stability returns no matter which path you take, what criteria beyond that temporary emotional intensity must you use today to figure out the true long-term viability of this decision?
If both roads eventually lead to a tranquil state, what are the things that define a relationship strong enough to thrive once that chemical urgency is gone? Is it shared goals? The ability to handle conflict? That's the deeper question that comes out of all this.
Something important to think about until our next deep dive.
Thank you for joining us for this essential deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. If you want to overcome betrayal, break toxic cycles, take control of your relationship choices, read How to Deal with a Love Triangle. The link is below the video.